let me sing to you now about how people turn into other things. This is a line from a book I'm currently reading called The Overstory. It is magnificent, both the book and that quote. And that quote originally comes from Ovid's collection of Greek mythical verse, Metamorphosis. And metamorphosis is something we typically associate with butterflies and moths, caterpillars and cocoons. And now it's something I associate with me. You see, for the past 7 years, I cocooned hard. And last August, in this very park, under that very willow tree, like something straight out of a transformation myth, a new version of me took shape. Not yet fully formed, but getting there. And this year on February 1st, after 41 years of learning and unlearning, untangling truth from myth, I finally broke free. Let's begin. My cocoon had a very specific location. In fact, it had an address. 1517 West Waveland, apartment number 2. This was my home. My first ever just me home. And I moved in on May 1st, 2014, scarred and dazed and more than a bit broken. I moved in 1 month after my divorce, an absolute Greek tragedy of a divorce, complete with battle wounds and god complexes, shapeshifters and secret lovers, Trojan horses and narcissists flying far too close to the sun. That entire epic played out in a faraway village, Roscoe Village, to be exact. But that was now part of my past, and I had traded gaslight for bright, golden sun. Dear God, the sun. Can I just take a moment to tell you about the sun in my Waveland apartment, because it was magic. That sun poured in through the leaves of the most majestic stand of maple trees outside my windows. In Japan, they even have a word for that, Komorebi, the sunlight as it streams through the leaves of a tree. The English language could use more words like that. I spent countless weekends bathed in that golden sunlight, laying on my living room sofa, a book in my hand, a cat on my lap, gazing at those trees, listening to their leaves rustle, slowly putting myself back together again. I called that apartment my treehouse, my nest, my cocoon, Circe's Ayaya. For all the years I lived there, it felt like a hug, so much so that over time I stopped craving embrace from the very people the myths had taught me to so desperately seek. When I moved in, I yearned to somehow get back on track. Over the previous years, I'd been set back, lost ground. In this game of life, I'd spun the wheel, landed on the wrong square, and paid the price. If I wanted a partner and a family and a life filled with love, then I had to act fast, act now. Callers were standing by. I was 34 years old and biology's clock was ticking, and if I was going to play this game and win, then I needed to get up and spin that fucking wheel. But I couldn't. The hand that was supposed to spin the wheel, move the piece, add the husband, pink child 1, blue child 2, wouldn't move. Hell, it wouldn't even open the front door. Instead, it reached for a book. And then another. And then another. Week after week, year after year, cocooning itself in the silk of other people's stories. Stories where women were sold the same game of life, pushed down the prescribed path and stopped to pause, heard the clock, listened to their own heart, then traded the game of life for a life of their own making. Eventually, when they had time to rest, these women across time and space sat down, wrote their stories, slipped them into paperback bottles, and tossed them out to sea, where maybe, just maybe, they'd wash in the surf on another searching traveler's shore. Thousands of those paper and ink missives began to line my bookshelves, filling my head and heart with possibility, futures I'd never dreamed to imagine, loves that had always felt mythically out of reach. And then the storm came. Last year on August 10th, 2020, like something plucked straight out of a dystopian myth, the city of Chicago played host to not just a deadly plague, but also a tornado. And that tornado ripped every one of my maple trees straight out of the earth, as if by Zeus's hand itself. Gone. Just like that. Those trees and their sun-dappled light had been as much a part of my home as the pillow I laid my head on, and when they were uprooted, so was I. That following weekend, I came here to Winnemac Park in search of green and refuge and a little bit of healing. I found myself at the base of this willow tree, staring at her bark, following the ribboned fissures as they twirled upward from root to leafy crown. Have you ever gazed at willow bark? It's wild, truly wild, like a freestyle cable-knit sweater beholden to no rules, all interlacing twists and turns, curves and curls, an endless looping path stretching ever skyward, kind of like the game of life. Except rather than one set course marked with punishments and pruned of off-ramps, in the willow bark there are millions upon millions of unfurling trails, each yours for the taking. One branched path leads to the next, and at every fork your only task and ask is to choose. Truth or myth? Myth or truth? Guesses turning into yeses, each choice begetting the next. This way, that way, feel it, change course, lick your finger, feel the air. It's entirely your map for the charting. Nothing about a willow tree's bark is straight. And that day, gilded in her sun-dappled light, I realized neither was I. It was a myth. A myth that had told me who I was, what I wasn't, who my body was meant to serve, one so time-honored and convincing that I'd picked up a pen and started to write it myself. As someone whose tender roots first took hold in Southern Baptist soil, I can wholeheartedly say that the sweetest, most sacred baptism I've known happened that day under that tree. Scriptured sentences that felt like life sentences were exposed to light, flooded, and washed free. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. I had submitted my body until I no longer recognized it as my own. We wake up every day with holes in our hearts and are told this makes us holy. We're warned not to stray from the beaten path. Whose soul is taking the beating? I had learned to dissociate, cleave myself in two, a numbed body for him, a numbed soul for me. Like Solomon and the baby, everyone wins. The Bible and marriage therapists told me so. One person's myth is often another person's truth, so you see where this gets complicated, and I am not here to throw shade or cast doubt. Each person's truth is sacred and for them to decide, so long as they seek not to control, seed fear, or do harm. That day under the willow tree, a part of me was born. Reborn, born again, if you will. This year on February 1st, after 41 years of untangling my new growth truth from an old growth myth, I came out as queer. This year on March 24th, I had my first communion, of sorts. And last weekend on October 16th, 1 year and 2 months to the day after that first fateful meeting, I sat here underneath that willow tree writing this story, my missive, scrolled in a paperback bottle. Only this time, there were 2 blankets under that tree instead of 1. My love beside me, sketching berries in her notebook. Our notebooks filled with paper descended from once wild trees. Both of us bathed in Komorebi, the light and shadows dancing across our pages as we picked up our pens and turned life into art. I've traded acting now for being here now. Wouldn't you know those words are inked on her skin, tucked under their sweater on the very arm guiding her pen. Be here now. Her skin sings me this song daily. Her eyes flick up to mine. We smile. It's been a long, epic, some may even say Herculean road to get here, but fuck, it was worth it. Gone are the ticking clocks. We traded them for infinite hourglasses. Wouldn't you know that ever-looping, regenerating symbol is sculpted in the bark of that tree? I will show you. That tree whispered to me that day, and I whispered right back. It said, put down your books. Those words healed and reshaped you, but there's a story in you, and it's begging for you to listen. I sat down, picked up my pen, and the truth poured out of me. Who am I? What do I want? Who do I want? Why does this scare me? Why don't I embrace it? Why don't I accept the invitation to live and love and explore all that my soul is reaching for? Like those gently held limbs above me, I may as well say yes to this dance. Maybe the willows weep, not in sorrow, but for joy. Let me sing to you now about how people turn into other things.